Hello, and if you've found your way to this video, let me take you back in time. Tonight we journey into the heart of the desert. Imagine the winds of Arabia brushing against your face, carrying with them the dry scent of sand and stone. The night sky above is endless, scattered with stars that glimmer like ancient lanterns, lighting the way across empty dunes. The silence of the desert is deep, almost eternal, yet somewhere within it lies a secret. For here, hidden among the rose-red cliffs of southern Jordan, there is a city carved not by the hands of kings or emperors, but by a people of traders and wanderers. They tamed the desert, commanded the waters, and built temples and tombs that still shimmer in the sunlight 2,000 years later. This place is called Petra, the Red City. To the outside world, Petra seemed like a mirage. Travelers whispered of a hidden capital where entire facades were sculpted into living rock, and where caravans carrying spices, silk, and incense once passed in endless lines. For centuries, its gates were closed to strangers, its name little more than a rumour. And then, like the shifting sands, it vanished. Forgotten, abandoned, swallowed by the desert itself. But Petra never truly disappeared. It waited, and when it was rediscovered in the 19th century, explorers spoke in awe of its grandeur. Towering facades glowing pink at dawn, labyrinths of canyons, and the haunting silence of a city where voices had long since faded. In this story, we will walk together through the winding gorge that guards its entrance. We will stand before the Treasury, carved like a jewel into living stone. We will hear the echo of footsteps in the amphitheater, smell the incense of distant markets, and watch the decline of a people whose mastery of desert life once defied empires. This is the tale of Petra, the city of caravans, the city of stone, the city of memory. A place where the desert itself once breathed life into stone, and where the silence of centuries still speaks to us today. So close your eyes, let the sound carry you, and together we will step into the rose-red city, half as old as time. Far to the south of the Dead Sea, beyond barren ridges and dry riverbeds, lies a desert where silence is almost a living thing. By day, the sun beats down mercilessly, scattering waves of heat that blur the horizon. By night, the temperature falls sharply, and the stones of the desert breathe out the heat they have stored. Under a vast canopy of stars, travellers once made their way along dusty paths, guided only by constellations and the memory of ancient routes. It is within this landscape of extremes, both unforgiving and breathtaking, that Petra slumbers, hidden among canyons and cliffs of rose-red sandstone. The first impression of Petra is not of the city itself, but of the path that leads to it, the Sick. This narrow gorge stretches for more than a kilometre, twisting and turning between towering cliffs that rise as high as 80 metres. The walls lean inward, as though the mountain itself were closing in on the traveller. Light filters down in thin shafts, touching veins of red, purple, and ochre in the stone. Walking through the Sick feels like entering a sacred passage, a threshold between the outside world and something timeless, concealed, and immense. For centuries, the Sick has served as Petra's hidden gate. To step into it was to leave the desert behind and enter a world of power and beauty. Caravans of camels once moved silently through this gorge, their bells echoing against the stone. Merchants carried goods wrapped in cloth, frankincense from Arabia, silk from China, spices from India. The air would have been heavy with the smell of leather, sweat, and exotic scents, carried on the breeze through this natural corridor. Each traveller, each trader, must have felt a sense of anticipation, for they knew that beyond the last turn of the sick, the desert itself would open to reveal a city carved out of living rock. And then, suddenly, it appears. The narrow gorge widens, and there, as if waiting in silence, stands Al-Khazneh, the Treasury. Its facade rises from the stone like a vision, sculpted with perfect symmetry. Columns, capitals, pediments, and statues, all carved directly into the cliff face, glow with a rose-coloured light as the sun strikes them. The first glimpse of this monument is overwhelming, and even today, visitors speak of its appearance as though it were an illusion. Imagine the impact on a weary traveller from 2,000 years ago. After days of journeying through desert sands, to arrive at this vision must have felt like stepping into a dream. But the Treasury was not just a marvel of beauty, it was a statement of power. To carve a building of such scale into stone required immense skill, organisation, and resources. Its presence at the end of the Seek announced to every visitor, this was no mere outpost, but the heart of a kingdom. The Nabataeans, the people who built Petra, wanted every guest, whether friend, merchant or rival, to understand their command over stone, water and wealth. The desert around Petra seems lifeless, yet it holds secrets of survival. The Nabataeans were masters at drawing water from the driest places. Hidden channels run along the walls of the sick, carved and plastered to carry rainwater into reservoirs within the city. To the untrained eye, they are easy to miss, blending with the natural curves of the rock. But to the Nabataeans, they were lifelines, transforming a desolate valley into a thriving metropolis. To walk into Petra was to enter a place where humans had bent the desert to their will. Imagine standing at the entrance in the 1st century CE. Around you, the sounds of life fill the canyon. Camels grunt as they kneel, their burdens lifted by handlers. Children dart between traders, laughing as they chase each other through the dust. Merchants shout in different tongues, Aramaic, Greek, Arabic, Latin, haggling over the prices of incense, purple dye, or glassware. Musicians pluck strings, drums beat softly, and the aroma of roasting meat mingles with the perfume of spices. In this moment, Petra feels alive, a crossroads of worlds, hidden yet connected to distant lands. Yet beyond this vivid activity, there is always the stillness of the desert. Step a little away from the crowd, and the silence returns, heavy and unbroken. The cliffs loom above, painted by centuries of wind and rain into striations of red, orange and violet. The desert sky stretches endlessly, a deep blue by day and black velvet by night. To live here was to live at the edge of nature's extremes, and perhaps that is why Petra carries such an aura of mystery. It is a city born from hardship, a city that should not exist and yet does, carved from stone, sustained by ingenuity, and infused with a kind of sacred endurance. The secret of Petra is not just its hidden location, but its duality. To outsiders, it appeared impossible, a city flourishing where no city should stand. To its inhabitants, it was home, a place where desert knowledge and human ambition merged. The Nabataeans used the natural cliffs as protection, channeling water into cisterns, carving tombs and temples into stone, and decorating facades with motifs borrowed from distant cultures. Every pillar and carving whispered of connections that stretched across continents. Petra was never isolated, it was a meeting place, a living testimony to trade and cultural exchange. But part of Petra's secret lies in its silence. For centuries after its decline, when the caravans stopped coming and the Nabataean kingdom had faded into history, the city remained. The treasury, the monastery, the tombs, all of them stood untouched, hidden by the desert's veil. Local Bedouin knew of its presence and kept its location close, telling tales of treasures locked away within the stone. To the outside world, Petra had become a ghost, a whisper carried on the desert wind, its reality uncertain. In 1812, when the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as a pilgrim and persuaded local guides to lead him there, he must have felt the same awe as the merchants of old. As he stepped out of the sick and beheld the treasury, the illusion of a city reborn must have gripped him. His words would later reintroduce Petra to the world, transforming it from forgotten ruins into one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of modern times. And so, Petra holds its secret still. To walk through the sick is to retrace the steps of countless generations. To emerge before the treasury is to glimpse the grandeur of a vanished kingdom. But more than monuments, it is the atmosphere that lingers, the fusion of silence and life, of desert and stone, of mystery and revelation. Petra is not merely a city abandoned, it is a memory carved into the earth itself, waiting for those who will listen. As we begin this journey into Petra's story, let us pause at the mouth of the sick. Ahead lies a city that rose from nothing, flourished beyond expectation, and then faded into silence. In the chapters that follow, we will uncover the people who made it possible, the Nabataeans, and learn how they transformed this desert into a place of wonder. But for now, in this first step, let us stand in awe before the gates of stone and acknowledge the desert's greatest secret, a city that refused to die, a city that still breathes in the heart of the sands. Long before Petra became a city of facades and temples, before merchants carried silk and incense through its narrow gorge, there were the Nabataeans. They were not emperors with armies of conquest, nor kings born into ancient dynasties. They were a people of the desert, wanderers who had learned to read the shifting sands, to survive in places where others would wither. And yet, from this harsh beginning, they built a kingdom that left behind one of the greatest wonders of antiquity. To understand Petra, we must first understand them. The Nabataeans emerged sometime in the 4th century BCE, though their origins are still debated. Some scholars trace them back to nomadic Arab tribes who roamed the deserts of northern Arabia, moving with their flocks and camels in search of pasture. Others see them as a confederation of clans who gradually settled, trading independence for the security of alliances. Whatever their beginnings, the Nabataeans had two qualities that defined their destiny: resilience in the desert and a gift for trade. The desert is a stern teacher. It allows no indulgence, no waste, and no carelessness. To survive, one must know where the hidden springs lie, how to navigate by the stars, when to move the herds, and when to wait in patience. The Nabataeans mastered all of this. Their lives were bound to the rhythms of the land, the scarce rains, the migrations of animals, the winds that shifted the dunes. They moved lightly, never tied to one place, carrying their tents and possessions with them. From childhood, they learned endurance, for hunger and thirst were constant companions. But they were not only survivors, they were also opportunists. They saw that the desert, far from being a barren void, was in fact a vast crossroads. Between the kingdoms of Mesopotamia, the ports of the Red Sea, the markets of Egypt, and the rising cities of the Mediterranean, caravans had to pass through the wilderness. Incense, frankincense, myrrh, spices, and textiles, all the treasures of Arabia, and India flowed along these routes. The Nabataeans, with their knowledge of desert paths and waterholes, were perfectly positioned to control and profit from this trade. At first, they acted as guides and protectors. A caravan venturing into the desert needed Nabataean knowledge to survive. For a fee, the tribes would escort merchants through the arid lands, defending them against raiders and ensuring their camels found water. But over time, the Nabataeans realized they could do more than guide, they could dominate. They knew shortcuts invisible to outsiders, hidden springs that could mean the difference between life and death. With this knowledge, they could channel trade through their own lands, demanding tribute or simply absorbing the profits into their own markets. By the 3rd century BCE, the Nabataeans had begun to shift from wandering tribes to a more settled people. They discovered that their strength lay not just in mobility, but in the ability to create centres where caravans could gather, rest and exchange goods. Petra was one of these centres, though not the only one. In the beginning, it may have been nothing more than a cluster of tents in a valley with good access to water. But its position was ideal, nestled in a hidden canyon, defensible, and close to the main trade arteries. Over time, the tents gave way to stone structures, and Petra became the beating heart of Nabataean power. What made the Nabataeans remarkable was not just that they seized opportunities, but that they combined traditions with innovation. Their architecture blended the influences of cultures they encountered: Hellenistic columns, Egyptian motifs, Mesopotamian patterns, yet always carved into the living rock of their homeland. Their language was Aramaic, the lingua franca of trade across the Near East, but infused with their own dialects and symbols. Their gods were often local deities of the desert: Dushara, the lord of the mountains, Al-Uzza, the goddess of might. But they absorbed foreign divinities too, shaping them into their pantheon. In everything, the Nabataeans were adapters, able to borrow, refine and fuse until they created something uniquely their own. Central to their survival was their genius for water. No other people of their time were so skilled at harnessing every drop of rain. The Nabataeans carved channels into rock, lined them with plaster, and led them into covered cisterns. They created hidden reservoirs, some large enough to supply entire districts of Petra, yet disguised so that outsiders could not easily find them. They terraced slopes to catch runoff and built dams to divert sudden floods into storage pools. In an environment where rainfall was rare and rivers ephemeral, they turned scarcity into abundance. This mastery allowed them not only to sustain themselves, but to host large populations and passing caravans. Their economy thrived. By the 2nd century BCE, the Nabataeans had grown wealthy enough to attract the attention of neighbouring powers. The Seleucid kings, heirs of Alexander's empire, tried to subdue them, but found the desert an impossible enemy. Roman generals, too, discovered that chasing Nabataeans across the sands led only to frustration and exhaustion. For while the Nabataeans lacked heavy armies, they possessed the desert as an ally. Their camels carried them swiftly, their knowledge of hidden wells kept them alive, and their light fighters could vanish into the wilderness at will. Time and again, stronger empires attempted to break them, but Petra endured. What emerges is a picture of a people who understood balance. They did not seek to conquer vast territories, nor to impose themselves through brute force. Instead, they prospered by weaving themselves into the networks of exchange that crisscrossed the ancient world. They became indispensable, the keepers of the desert gates, the masters of routes, the guardians of life in barren lands. Their very identity was shaped by this role, neither fully nomadic nor fully urban, neither isolated nor absorbed. They lived between worlds, and in doing so, they thrived. The Nabataeans also left their mark in ways that were less material, but no less enduring. Their inscriptions, scratched onto rock faces across the region, reveal not only their names and prayers, but their sense of presence in the landscape. Many are simple so-and-so passed here. This well belongs to so-and-so. Yet together, they form a chorus of voices across the desert. These inscriptions, scattered and weathered, are like echoes of a people who refuse to be forgotten. Their reputation as traders was matched by their skill as diplomats. The Nabataeans often avoided direct confrontation, preferring negotiation, alliances, and calculated tributes. They paid when necessary, fought when unavoidable, and always looked for the advantage of patience. Their kingdom lasted for centuries, not because they could overpower others, but because they could outlast them. When the winds shifted, they adjusted their sails. When trade moved, they redirected it. When empires collapsed, they remained. By the 1st century BCE, the Nabataeans had grown from desert tribes into a recognized kingdom. Petra, their capital, was not just a market, but a statement of identity. Facades carved into cliffs, tombs stretching into valleys, temples rising above streets. To outsiders, it was astonishing that a people of tents had built such permanence. To the Nabataeans, it was the natural flowering of their resilience and ingenuity. And yet, even as they carved their monuments, they never lost their bond with the desert. The city was built to reflect the rhythms of its environment. Its channels followed the rain's path, its walls echoed the lines of cliffs, its streets aligned with the sun. Petra was not imposed upon the desert, but grown from it, a partnership between human vision and natural form. In the centuries to come, Petra would rise to dazzling heights, becoming the envy of empires. But its foundations were always the same. A people who had mastered the art of living where others could not, who had turned sand and stone into wealth and culture. The Nabataeans remind us that history is not only written by the conquerors. Sometimes it belongs to those who endure quietly, who find strength in what others overlook, who carve beauty out of harshness. They were wanderers who became builders, survivors who became hosts, outsiders who became indispensable. And it was they who gave the desert its greatest secret, the city of Petra, the rose-red jewel half as old as time. The desert may seem empty to the untrained eye, but in the age of the Nabataeans, it was threaded with invisible lines. These were the caravan route's lifelines that stitched together the ancient world. Across these tracks of sand and stone moved not armies but merchants, their trains of camels bearing goods that carried the fragrance of far-off lands. It was through these routes that Petra rose to prominence, not as a city of conquest, but as a city of exchange, where cultures met, deals were struck and fortunes were made. Imagine standing at the edge of Petra during its height, sometime in the 1st century CE. From dawn to dusk, the air is alive with movement. Long lines of camels enter the city through the sick, their footsteps muffled against the dust. Their backs are laden with bales of incense from southern Arabia, silk from distant China, spices from India, and glassware from Syria. Their handlers, wrapped in robes against the desert sun, speak a dozen languages, shouting commands, bargaining, calling out greetings to those they recognize. Petra is no longer a hidden city in a canyon. It is the beating heart of international commerce. The Nabataeans had a genius for positioning themselves at the crossroads. From the south, caravans brought frankincense and myrrh, highly prized in temples and courts from Egypt to Rome. From the east came silk and gemstones, carried along the great trade networks that stretched all the way to China. From the north, Syria and Mesopotamia sent glass, metals and fine cloth. And from the west, Egypt offered grain and luxury goods that found their way through Petra to the Mediterranean. To control Petra was to control the flow of wealth itself. At its height, Petra's markets must have been astonishing to behold. Picture stalls lined along stone-paved streets, shaded by awnings of woven fabric. Merchants displayed their wares, sacks of cinnamon and cardamom, their scents drifting into the air, bolts of silk shimmering in the desert light, jars of perfume sealed with wax, bright beads of lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Gold glints in the hands of jewelers, while potters stack their wares in towers of painted clay. The cacophony of voices is endless, Greek mingling with Aramaic, Latin with Arabic, traders bargaining over every measure and weight. And yet, despite the noise, there is order. The Nabataeans thrive not on chaos, but on control. They impose tariffs, regulate the flow of goods, and ensure that every caravan pays its due. Their officials move through the crowds, recording transactions, collecting fees, and maintaining peace. Petra's prosperity depends not only on trade itself, but on the trust that merchants can find safety here. In a world where bandits lurked on every road and empires taxed heavily, Petra offered security and fairness. For this reason, caravans returned again and again, choosing its markets over others. The wealth generated by this trade transformed Petra. From the profits of incense alone burned in rituals from the temples of Babylon to the shrines of Rome, the Nabataeans grew rich. Roman authors complained of the staggering amounts of gold flowing eastward to pay for luxuries, while Petra's treasuries filled. With this wealth, the Nabataeans commissioned monuments that still stand today. Tombs cut into cliffs, temples rising on terraces, and public spaces designed to impress every visitor. The grandeur of Petra was not born from conquest, but from commerce. But it was not only goods that flowed into Petra, it was also ideas. A caravan city is a city of encounters. Alongside spices and silk came stories, religions, and technologies. Greek sculptors left their mark on Petra's facades. Egyptian symbols adorned its temples. Mesopotamian influences shaped its deities. The Nabataeans did not shut their gates to foreign culture. They absorbed it, reshaping it into something distinctly their own. This openness made Petra not just a hub of trade, but a hub of culture, where the world's diversity was etched into stone. At night, the city did not sleep. Torches flickered in the markets as deals continued long after the sun had set. Musicians played on flutes and drums while dancers entertained weary merchants. Tavern-like houses offered wine imported from the Mediterranean, while priests lit incense in shrines, sending smoke curling into the desert sky. The scent of myrrh lingered in the air, mingling with roasting meat and the smell of camels resting nearby. Petra at night was alive, a city where wealth did not rest, and where the desert itself seemed to glow under the light of countless fires. But there was also something more subtle in the life of Petra. For while it thrived on international commerce, it also fostered a unique local identity. Nabataean pottery, painted with red designs, became known across the region. Their coinage, stamped with the likenesses of their kings and gods, circulated far beyond their borders. Their language, though rooted in Aramaic, developed distinctive scripts that left inscriptions across the desert. Every trade, every carving, every transaction reinforced Petra's place as both a world crossroads and a home of its own people. Yet prosperity carries risks. Petra's wealth made it desirable to neighbours and empires. The Seleucids, the Hasmoneans, and later the Romans all cast their gaze upon the rose-red city, but Petra's strength lay not only in its stone walls, but in the desert itself. Armies could not easily march through its barren expanses. Caravans depended on Nabataean goodwill to survive. Thus Petra remained independent far longer than most cities of its age, guarded not by legions but by the emptiness of the land it commanded. Even so, the Nabataeans understood that their prosperity was fragile. Trade routes could shift, markets could decline, and so they invested heavily in ensuring their dominance of the incense trade. They secured oases, fortified waypoints, and negotiated alliances that kept caravans flowing toward Petra. Every stone facade carved into the cliffs was a declaration. This city is eternal. This wealth will not fade. But history, as always, had other plans. For now, though, in its golden age, Petra was dazzling. To enter the city as a foreign merchant was to step into a world of wonder. The Treasury greeted you like a temple of wealth. The markets overwhelmed you with abundance, and the people adaptable, multilingual, endlessly resourceful, ensured that your journey ended not in loss but in profit. The desert might hold dangers, but within Petra there was safety, prosperity, and splendour. And so Petra became known as the City of Caravans. It was not only a city that lived off trade, it was a city that embodied trade itself, a place where every stone seemed to whisper of journeys begun and completed, of goods exchanged and fortunes made. To the Romans it was enviable, to the Greeks it was exotic, to the Arabs it was powerful, to the Nabataeans it was home, the heart of their kingdom, the jewel of their endurance. In the centuries ahead, challenges would come: political pressures, Roman expansion, and the slow decline of overland trade. But in this moment, Petra stood unrivaled. Its streets bustled with life, its coffers overflowed with wealth, and its name carried far beyond the desert winds. This was its height, its glory, its secret unveiled to the world. The desert is both a destroyer and a giver. It strips the land of life with one hand, then with the other, in rare and sudden moments, offers water in torrents that sweep through valleys and canyons. For most people, this unpredictability meant death. Crops withered in the dry years, flash floods destroyed what little settlements dared to rise. But for the Nabataeans, this very paradox of the desert became their foundation. They learned to bend the desert's rhythm to their will, to store its fleeting gifts, and to create abundance where none should exist. If Petra was the city of caravans, it was equally the city of water. Without water, no caravan could rest, no merchant could stay, and no population could thrive. The Nabataeans knew this, and so they devoted their greatest skill not to warfare, nor to palaces of luxury, but to the quiet, enduring art of hydraulic engineering. Their mastery of water is the hidden skeleton of Petra, the reason the city could rise and endure for centuries. The very gorge that leads into Petra, the Sick, is itself part of this system. To the casual visitor, the narrow passage feels like a natural wonder, a chance crack in the mountains. But the Nabataeans saw more than beauty, they saw opportunity. Along both sides of the Sick, they carved channels into the stone, lining them with waterproof plaster. Some were open, others covered with slabs to protect the water from contamination and evaporation. Rainfall from the surrounding hills was guided into these channels, flowing steadily toward reservoirs hidden within the city. For the traveller entering Petra, these channels might have seemed invisible, blending with the natural stone. But for the Nabataeans, every groove and curve was deliberate. In an environment where every drop mattered, the Sick became not only a dramatic entrance, but a living artery, carrying water into the heart of the city. Beyond the Sick, the Nabataeans built an intricate network of cisterns and reservoirs. They understood the desert's cruel rhythm, months of dryness followed by sudden storms that sent torrents crashing down the wadis. Left unmanaged, these floods could destroy fields and sweep away tents, but managed wisely, they could sustain life for months. So the Nabataeans built dams across wadis, capturing the floods and redirecting them into storage pools. They carved cisterns into hillsides, some small enough to water a family, others vast enough to supply entire districts. Archaeologists have identified dozens of such reservoirs around Petra, their plastered walls still bearing the marks of Nabataean hands. In some places, the system was so sophisticated that a single storm could fill enough cisterns to sustain the city for half a year. Covered channels carried water underground, protecting it from the brutal sun. Terraced fields captured runoff, directing it gently toward gardens and crops. Nothing was wasted. Even the rain that fell upon rooftops and facades was guided into hidden collection points. With water secure, the Nabataeans achieved something extraordinary. They farmed the desert. Archaeological surveys around Petra have revealed evidence of orchards and fields once green with life. Wheat, barley, olives, figs and grapes grew in terraces carved along slopes. The terraces held the soil in place, slowed the flow of rainwater, and ensured that precious moisture seeped into the ground rather than vanishing. Imagine the sight. Outside the canyons, the desert stretches empty and barren, but within Petra's valleys, greenery bursts forth. Groves of olives shimmer in the sun, vineyards climb the terraces, and date palms sway gently in the breeze. To travellers arriving from weeks in the wilderness, this must have seemed like paradise, a hidden garden conjured from stone and sand. The Nabataeans' mastery of water was not only for themselves, it was also their greatest weapon in controlling trade. Caravans depended utterly on water, and the Nabataeans controlled its sources. Wells, cisterns and reservoirs dotted their trade routes, each one carefully guarded. A caravan that wished to cross their lands had no choice but to pay, to negotiate, or to perish. This monopoly was more powerful than any army. Empires could march legions, but without water, they faltered. Merchants could carry gold, silk, and incense, but without Nabataean wells, they would not survive the desert. Thus, the Nabataeans turned water into wealth, making themselves indispensable to every traveller who braved the sands. For a people who lived so closely with the rhythms of nature, water was not only practical, it was sacred. The Nabataeans worshipped deities tied to mountains, storms and fertility. Springs were often consecrated, their waters flowing near shrines and altars. Some temples in Petra show signs of water channels leading directly into sacred spaces, as though water itself was an offering to the gods. Imagine a ritual at dusk. Priests pouring water from a carved spout into a basin, incense rising into the twilight, chants echoing against the cliffs. To the Nabataeans, controlling water was not merely engineering, it was communion with the divine. Every drop carried both survival and sanctity. Modern archaeologists still marvel at the Nabataean water system. In many places, their plaster channels are intact after 2,000 years. Their dams, though weathered, still mark the valleys. The sheer scale of their planning suggests a society deeply organised, where knowledge was passed through generations of engineers, masons, and farmers. Yet this genius remained hidden for centuries. To outsiders, Petra seemed miraculous, a thriving city in the heart of desolation. Few realized that its lifeblood flowed invisibly through stone-carved veins and subterranean cisterns. The Nabataeans revealed their monuments, but guarded their secrets. This was perhaps their greatest triumph, not only to capture water, but to conceal the methods from those who might seek to control them. Consider the contrast. Outside Petra, the desert is merciless, dunes shifting endlessly, the air dry and sharp, the horizon empty. Yet inside Petra, fountains once gurgled, pools reflected the sky, and gardens flourished in green abundance. This duality gave the city its power. Travellers arriving weary and parched would find not only shelter, but refreshment, their thirst quenched, their camels watered, their spirits revived. The memory of that transformation ensured Petra's reputation as a place of wonder. And it was more than practical, it was psychological. To walk from barren sands into a valley alive with water was to feel that the Nabataeans commanded magic. They had done what others could not. They had bent the desert to their will. Even after Petra declined, its waterworks remained. Bedouin tribes who lived near the ruins used the ancient cisterns, drawing life from systems built long before. In times of drought, these remnants proved invaluable, a testament to the foresight of a vanished people. Today, when archaeologists and visitors trace the plastered channels and climb into the empty cisterns, they see not only engineering, but vision. The Nabataeans did not wait for the desert to be kind. They planned for its cruelty, embraced its unpredictability, and turned its violence into sustenance. In this way, they survived, prospered, and carved their legacy into stone. Petra could not have existed without this mastery of water. Its facades may dazzle, its markets may bustle. But beneath it all lies the quiet genius of channels and cisterns. The City of Caravans was also a city of wells, where every drop was treasured and where survival was transformed into art. In the next chapter, we will stand before the monuments that rose from this foundation, the red stone temples, where Nabataean wealth and artistry found their most enduring expression. But let us pause here, by the hidden channels of the sick and the terraces of the valley, to acknowledge the true lifeblood of Petra, the water that turned a desert into a city of dreams. The desert gave the Nabataeans hardship, but in return, it also gave them stone. Not the brittle kind that crumbles at the first strike of a chisel, but sandstone of every shade red, pink, purple, orange, soft enough to carve, yet strong enough to endure for millennia. With this stone, they sculpted not merely houses or fortifications, but monuments so vast and intricate that they seemed less the work of human hands than of gods. To enter Petra was to step into a gallery where the mountains themselves had been transformed into architecture. The most famous of these monuments greets the traveller at the end of the sick. Al-Khazneh, the Treasury, is Petra's crown jewel, carved directly into a towering cliff. Rising nearly 40 metres high, its facade is a masterpiece of symmetry. 6 Corinthian columns support a triangular pediment. Above it, a central tholos, framed by columns, rises like a stone crown. Sculptures of eagles, Amazons, and mythological figures adorn its niches, blending Hellenistic motifs with local style. The Treasury is not a freestanding building. It is the mountain itself, carved into the illusion of a temple palace. This fusion of nature and art was the Nabataean genius. They did not impose their will upon the landscape with imported stone or mortar. Instead, they hollowed out the cliffs, sculpting facades as though coaxing shapes already hidden within the rock. The effect is overwhelming. Emerging from the six shadows into the sudden brightness of the Treasury is like witnessing a curtain lifted on another world. But the purpose of the Treasury remains a mystery. Despite its grandeur, it was not a royal treasury in the literal sense. Most scholars believe it was a tomb for a Nabataean king, perhaps Aretas IV, who reigned during Petra's golden age in the early 1st century CE. Others suggest it may have served ritual or commemorative functions. Legends grew around it. Bedouin tales claimed that the urn atop the central tholos contained hidden riches, and bullet marks still scar its surface from treasure seekers who once fired upon it in hope of breaking it open. Whatever its purpose, the Treasury embodied the Nabataean message to the world. Here is a people who can turn stone into majesty, who can match the splendour of Egypt and Greece, yet do so with their own hand and style. If the Treasury astonishes with its sudden appearance, the monastery, or adir, overwhelms with its scale. Reached by climbing more than 800 rock-cut steps into the hills above Petra, the monastery stands remote, massive, and silent. Its facade is larger than the Treasury, rising over 45 metres wide and nearly 50 metres high. Carved in the 2nd century CE, it has fewer decorative details, but a grandeur that speaks of raw power. The monastery's name comes from later Christian hermits, who may have used it, but its Nabataean origin was likely as a temple or commemorative monument. Inside, the chamber is vast and plain, with niches for offerings or rituals. Yet the exterior, with its monumental columns and towering doorway, would have inspired awe in any pilgrim or trader who climbed the arduous path. Standing before the monastery, the silence of the desert stretches endlessly, broken only by the whisper of the wind. It is a place that feels outside time, a sanctuary carved into the mountain itself. Petra is often called a city of the dead, for its cliffs are honeycombed with tombs. More than 800 have been identified, each carved with facades ranging from modest rectangles to grand designs echoing palaces. For the Nabataeans, death was not hidden away, but displayed in stone, a continuation of life's splendour into eternity. Among the most striking are the royal tombs, a cluster of grand facades cut into the eastern cliffs. The urn tomb, with its broad terrace and vaulted interior, may have served as the burial place of Nabataean royalty. Beside it, the silk tomb glows, with swirling patterns of red, yellow and white stone, as though the rock itself were painted with flowing silk. The Corinthian tomb, with its ornate capitals, echoes the style of the Treasury, while the palace tomb stretches wide across the cliff, resembling a multi-storied building with dozens of carved windows. Walking beneath these facades, one feels both awe and melancholy. The tombs are empty now, their treasures long gone, their occupants forgotten, yet the stone endures, carrying the memory of lives once lived in wealth and honour. The Nabataeans carved their immortality into the rock, confident that the desert would guard it. Petra was not only a necropolis, it was also a city of worship and celebration. The great temple, located in the city centre, sprawled across a vast terrace. Excavations reveal colonnaded halls, stairways, and courtyards where rituals and gatherings took place. Nearby stood the Temple of the Winged Lions, named for the carved figures that once adorned its columns. This temple was dedicated to a goddess, possibly Al-Uzza, and its remains suggest elaborate decoration and ritual significance. These temples, unlike the tombs, were centers of community life. Here, priests offered sacrifices, incense burned, and processions moved through courtyards. The sounds of chanting and music would have echoed off the surrounding cliffs, mingling with the ever-present desert wind. Another marvel of Petra is its amphitheater, carved directly into the mountainside. With seating for more than 6,000 people, it testifies to the city's scale and cultural life. From its tiers, spectators once watched performances, speeches and ceremonies. The voices of actors and orators, amplified by the natural acoustics of stone. Unlike the theatres of Greece or Rome, Petra's amphitheatre is not built of separate blocks but hewn from living rock. Entire cliff faces were reshaped to create rows of seats, stairs and a stage. To sit there, surrounded by tombs and temples carved into the same cliffs, must have been a surreal experience, a merging of architecture, nature and performance into a single spectacle. Taken together, Petra's monuments form a language of stone. Each facade, whether tomb, temple or theatre, tells a story of power, wealth and identity. The Nabataeans borrowed freely from Hellenistic and Roman motifs, columns, pediments, friezes, but always fused them with local traditions. Their architecture was not imitation, but adaptation, a dialogue between cultures. The effect was deliberate. Petra's visitors came from many lands, and the monument spoke to them in a language they could understand, while still proclaiming Nabataean uniqueness. A Greek might recognize familiar columns, an Egyptian might see echoes of temples, yet both would know they stood in a city unlike any other. It is easy to see Petra as ruins, silent and empty, but in its prime these monuments were alive. The Treasury's facade gleamed fresh from the chisel, its details crisp against the desert sun. The monastery hosted rituals where pilgrims gathered in solemn awe. The royal tombs shone with paint and decoration, now lost to time. The great temple thrummed with incense, chants and processions. Imagine the amphitheatre on a festival night. Torches blaze along the rows of seats. The stage glows with firelight. Musicians strike up a rhythm, and actors perform tales of gods and heroes. The audience merchants, nobles, farmers, children sits together. The desert night cool upon their faces, the stars glimmering above. The cliffs echo with applause and laughter, as though the mountains themselves joined in the celebration. Even now, after centuries of silence, these monuments hold their power. Visitors today still gasp when they first see the Treasury. They still climb breathlessly to the monastery, still wander among the royal tombs with reverence. The stone, though weathered, still speaks. It speaks of a people who turned their environment into art, who made the desert bloom not only with water, but with architecture. For the Nabataeans, stone was permanence. Water could vanish, trade could shift, kingdoms could fall, but stone endured, and so they carved their lives, their deaths, their gods, and their glory into the cliffs, trusting that long after their voices were gone, the red temples of Petra would remain. Petra's monuments are not merely ruins, they are messages across time, carved in a script of columns and pediments, whispers of a people who mastered both survival and splendour. To walk among them is to walk in the shadow of ambition made eternal. In the next part, we will step into the daily life of Petra at its height, when markets bustled, rituals thrived, and the city pulsed with energy. But first, let us linger among these red stone temples to marvel at the artistry that made the desert itself into a palace of memory. By the 1st century CE, Petra had reached its golden age. The rose-red city, hidden within its cliffs and canyons, had become not just a marketplace or a refuge, but the thriving capital of a kingdom whose wealth echoed across the ancient world. For merchants arriving after weeks in the desert, Petra was a revelation. Bustling streets, gardens blooming in unlikely valleys, facades glowing pink in the sunlight. Here, life flourished at the very edge of survival, and it flourished magnificently. Imagine walking through Petra at its height. The city centre is alive with movement. Stone-paved streets stretch ahead, lined with colonnades of slender pillars. Behind them stand rows of shops and workshops, their doorways open to reveal artisans at work. Potters shape clay on spinning wheels, their hands steady as they create vessels destined to carry oil, wine, or perfume. Jewelers sit cross-legged, stringing beads of turquoise and carnelian, hammering delicate patterns into gold. Weavers hang bolts of cloth dyed in vibrant hues, deep blues, saffron yellows, rich purples. The air is thick with sound, the braying of donkeys, the cries of hawkers advertising their goods, the laughter of children darting between stalls. Languages overlap: Greek, Aramaic, Arabic, Latin, each carrying its own cadence. A Roman trader haggles over frankincense. A Greek sailor counts coins for Nabataean wine. A caravan leader tallies the cost of fodder for his camels. Everywhere, the scent of spices fills the air. Cinnamon, cardamom, cloves mingled with roasting meat and fresh bread from stone ovens. Behind the markets and monuments, Petra was also a city of families. Houses carved into cliffs or built of stone blocks clustered along narrow lanes. Some were modest, a single room with storage niches and a hearth. Others were expansive, with multiple chambers, courtyards, and cisterns beneath. Water jars stood by doorways, shaded from the heat. Lamps burned with olive oil, casting a steady glow at night. Life followed a rhythm shaped by both trade and tradition. At dawn, women fetched water from cisterns, ground grain with stone querns, and baked flatbreads for the day. Children carried baskets of dates or figs, herded goats, or ran errands for merchants. Men tended fields on the terraces, managed shops, or prepared to join caravans. In the evenings, families gathered to share meals: lentils, bread, olives, perhaps lamb or chicken spiced with herbs. Music drifted from courtyards, with lutes and flutes accompanying songs passed down for generations. The city was not only for the wealthy. Labourers, artisans, and servants formed much of the population, their hands shaping the goods that made Petra famous. Slaves were present too, captured in wars or bought from markets, though Nabataean society also valued contracts and freedmen, creating complex layers of status. Faith was woven into every corner of Petra. The Nabataeans worshipped a pantheon of deities, both native and adopted. Their chief god was Dushara, the lord of the mountains, often represented by simple stone blocks or betils abstract, aniconic forms that embodied divine presence. Alongside him stood goddesses such as Al-Uzza, linked to fertility and might, and Alat, a motherly figure. Temples dotted the city, from the grand great temple to smaller shrines tucked into cliffs. Incense burned constantly, its smoke drifting upward like prayers. Priests performed sacrifices of animals or offerings of food and drink, chanting hymns in the echoing spaces. Water too was sacred. Springs and channels were often sanctified, symbolizing the desert's most precious gift. Rituals marked the seasons. At harvest, families offered the first fruits of their fields. During festivals, Processions wound through the streets, music filling the air, dancers performing in colourful garments. The amphitheater hosted not only plays, but also religious ceremonies, the cliffs ringing with voices raised in devotion. To live in Petra was to live with gods present in stone, water and sky. Petra's prosperity rested on its role as a mediator between worlds. Roman authors wrote of the immense wealth of the Nabataeans, marvelling at how they grew rich without armies of conquest. The caravans that passed through Petra paid taxes and tolls, filling the city's coffers. From this wealth came luxury. Imported goods filled the homes of Petra's elite, glassware from Syria, fine wine from the Mediterranean, perfumes from Egypt. Banquets were lavish, with dishes flavoured by spices from India and Arabia. Guests reclined on couches, sipping wine, while musicians played and servants brought trays of delicacies. Painted pottery and decorated lamps adorned their homes, while jewellery glittered on their wives and daughters. But even ordinary citizens felt the city's prosperity. Markets overflowed with food, clothing and household items. Public spaces, temples, colonnades, the theatre were accessible to all, signs of a society that invested wealth in communal pride. Petra was a city where abundance was visible, where the harshness of the desert was countered by human ingenuity and trade. As the sun set, Petra transformed. The cliffs glowed crimson in the fading light. Their carved facades softened into shadow. Lamps and torches lit the streets, casting flickering patterns on stone walls. Markets quieted, but taverns and houses came alive. Picture a courtyard at dusk. A family gathers around a low table, sharing bread, dates, and roasted lamb. Neighbours visit, bringing wine or honey cakes. Musicians strike up a tune on lutes, and voices rise in song. Children laugh, chasing each other through the alleys until called home by their mothers. Above it all, the desert sky spreads vast and star-filled, a reminder that beyond the city's lights lies endless silence. In wealthier homes, banquets stretch long into the night. Guests recline on cushions, drinking imported wine, while slaves pour water, scented with rose petals, into their cups. Dancers perform in the lamplight, their shadows playing on the painted walls. The conversation turns to trade, politics, and rumours of events in Rome or Alexandria. Petra may lie deep in the desert, but its people are never cut off from the wider world. Petra, at its height, was a place of contrasts. It was both cosmopolitan and deeply rooted in local tradition. It welcomed merchants from across continents, yet it remained distinctly Nabataean in faith and identity. It was wealthy, yet its foundations lay in the fragile balance of water and stone. It celebrated life in vibrant festivals, yet carved tombs that proclaimed death in monumental silence. This duality gave Petra its character. It was a place where opposites coexisted: desert and oasis, foreign and local, wealth and hardship, life and death. To walk its streets was to feel this tension and to marvel that it held together in harmony. Under King Aretas IV, who reigned from 9 BCE to 40 CE, Petra reached the zenith of its power. Known as the Philhellene for his embrace of Hellenistic culture, Aretas oversaw an era of prosperity and monumental building. Inscriptions bear his name, coins carry his image, and scholars believe many of Petra's grandest facades date to his reign. Under him, Petra was both a local kingdom and a player in the politics of the wider Near East, its wealth and influence stretching far beyond its canyon walls. This was the moment when Petra seemed eternal. Its markets thrived, its temples rang with devotion, Its monuments stood fresh and proud against the sky. To any who visited, the rose-red city appeared invincible, a jewel of the desert that would never fade. Petra, at its height, was more than stone and water. It was a living organism, pulsing with trade, faith, and daily life. It was a city where hardship had been transformed into abundance, where the desert's silence echoed with laughter, prayers, and music. In the next part, we will turn from its glory to the shadows that gathered, the pressures of empire, the fragility of trade, and the forces that would one day bring Petra to decline. But before that, let us hold this image, the city alive at its height, glowing red in the sun, alive with voices and filled with the dreams of a people who carved paradise from stone. Every city that rises carries within it the seeds of its decline. For Petra, the jewel of the desert, the fall did not come in one dramatic blow, but through the slow, grinding forces of time, trade, empire, and nature. What had once seemed eternal, a city carved in stone, fed by ingenious waterworks, enriched by caravans, from across the world gradually faded until silence reclaimed its streets. Petra's lifeblood was always trade. Its wealth, its monuments, its very existence depended on caravans that threaded the desert, bringing incense, silk, spices, and luxury goods from faraway lands. As long as these goods moved overland, Petra prospered. But trade is a fickle thing, shifting with politics, technology, and geography. By the 1st century CE, the balance began to tilt. The Roman Empire, ever hungry for control, expanded into the Nabataean sphere. In 106 CE, Emperor Trajan formally annexed the Nabataean kingdom, turning Petra into part of the Roman province of Arabia Petraea. The annexation was relatively peaceful. There were no grand battles, no tales of bloody conquest. Instead, it was as though Rome absorbed Petra by inevitability, folding it into its vast dominion. At first, Petra continued to thrive. Roman administrators recognized the value of the trade routes and maintained them. Roads were built, connecting Petra more firmly to the imperial network. Merchants still came, markets still bustled, temples still echoed with prayers. Yet beneath the surface, Petra's independence was gone, and with it the adaptability that had allowed the Nabataeans to bend with shifting winds. Now the city's fate was tied to the choices of an empire far away. The greatest challenge came not from politics, but from the sea. By the 2nd century CE, maritime routes across the Red Sea and Indian Ocean became safer and more efficient. Ships could carry greater loads than caravans, moving incense, spices, and silk directly to ports in Egypt or the Mediterranean. What once had to pass through Petra's gates now bypassed them entirely. The Nabataeans had built their wealth on being indispensable middlemen. But as sea trade grew, their monopoly on desert routes weakened. Slowly, inevitably, caravans dwindled. The streets that had once overflowed with camels and merchants became quieter. Shops closed, markets shrank, and the flow of gold into the city slowed to a trickle. As if the loss of trade were not enough, nature itself turned against Petra. The region is prone to earthquakes, and in 363 CE, a devastating quake struck. Temples collapsed, homes crumbled, and parts of the city's intricate water system were shattered. For a city so dependent on water management, the damage was catastrophic. Though some repairs were made, Petra never fully recovered. Other quakes followed in later centuries, each one further weakening structures and infrastructure. The grand facades remained, but behind them, life thinned. Families moved away, merchants sought fortune elsewhere, and the desert crept back into the city. By the Byzantine period, Petra had become a shadow of its golden age. Christian churches were built within its ruins, signs of a changing faith. Monks and hermits lived among the tombs, carving crosses into walls that had once borne Nabataean symbols. Pilgrims passed through, noting its strange mixture of grandeur and decay. Yet Petra was no longer a capital, no longer a hub of trade. It was a provincial town at the edge of empires, slowly forgotten by the world. By the 7th century, the rise of Islam shifted trade and politics once more. Caravans moved along new routes. Centres of power rose in Damascus, Baghdad, and later Cairo. Petra lay off the beaten path, bypassed and irrelevant. Its water systems, neglected, fell into disrepair. Without constant maintenance, channels clogged, cisterns filled with silt, and gardens withered. The desert began to reclaim what had been carved from it. For centuries afterward, Petra lingered in silence. Local Bedouin tribes knew of the ruins, weaving stories of hidden treasures within the stone facades. They called the great monument the Treasury, believing its urn held gold. They avoided revealing the city's location to outsiders, guarding it as a secret of the desert. To the wider world, Petra became a myth. Ancient geographers wrote of it vaguely, travellers spoke of a lost city hidden in the cliffs, but no clear record reached Europe. Like a mirage, Petra slipped into legend, a memory of a city that seemed too improbable to be real. It was not until 1812 that the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised as a Muslim pilgrim, persuaded local guides to take him to the site. Emerging from the city into the shadow of the Treasury, he beheld what the world had forgotten. His writings reintroduced Petra to the West, sparking fascination, expeditions, and eventually archaeological study. Yet by then, Petra was long dead as a living city. Its markets were gone, its temples silent, its amphitheatre empty. What remained were the facades, carved into the cliffs, glowing pink in the sun and silver beneath the moon. The stone endured, but the life within it had faded centuries before. Petra's decline holds a lesson as enduring as its monuments. It was not destroyed by invaders, nor consumed by fire, nor erased overnight. It faded slowly, undone by the forces of trade, empire, and nature. Its genius at harnessing water could not stop the shift of commerce to the seas. Its monuments could not withstand centuries of earthquakes. Its people could not hold back the tides of history. And yet, in its very decline, Petra achieved immortality. Had it remained a bustling city, it might have been rebuilt, altered, overwritten by later generations. Instead, abandoned and forgotten, it was preserved. Its facades remained intact, its tombs untouched, its silence unbroken. Petra died as a city, but was reborn as a monument, a testament to the Nabataeans and their mastery of survival in the desert. Petra's abandonment did not end its story. In the next and final part, we will turn to its rediscovery, its place in the imagination of explorers and historians, and its legacy as a wonder of the world. But here, in the quiet of its decline, let us pause to reflect on the fragility of even the greatest achievements. For Petra, carved in stone and sustained by genius, could not escape the truth that all cities, no matter how glorious, are bound to time. When a city falls silent, it does not vanish completely. It lingers in memory, in rumour, in fragments of story passed from one generation to the next. For centuries, Petra existed in this twilight of remembrance. The Nabataean kingdom was gone. Its trade routes shifted, its monuments left to the desert winds. Yet whispers endured of facades carved into cliffs, of a hidden city whose treasures lay sealed in stone. To the Bedouin tribes who roamed the region, Petra was never forgotten. But to the wider world, it had slipped into legend. In the early 19th century, European explorers and scholars, spurred by the spirit of discovery, began to seek the lost cities of antiquity. Egypt revealed its pyramids and temples. Mesopotamia gave up its buried palaces. But Petra remained elusive. Maps hinted at ruins in the deserts of southern Jordan, but local tribes were cautious. They had their own reasons to guard the secret. To them, the carved facades were the work of giants or spirits dangerous to disturb. They told tales of hidden gold in the great urn of the Treasury, and they fired bullets at it, hoping to shatter it and release the treasure within. It was into this world of rumour and guarded secrecy that Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, a Swiss traveller disguised as a Muslim pilgrim, arrived in 1812. Speaking fluent Arabic and dressed as a Bedouin, he convinced guides to lead him through the sick. Imagine his first glimpse, the narrow gorge opening, the sudden blaze of light, the treasury revealed in full majesty. For centuries, no outsider had seen it. Burckhardt recorded his astonishment in restrained words, careful not to betray his true identity, but the awe he felt echoes through history. With Burckhardt's account, Petra returned to the Western imagination. Soon travellers, adventurers and archaeologists followed. Some came in wonder, others in greed, hoping to find the treasures of legend. Many left their marks graffiti, bullet scars, careless digs, but they also spread Petra's fame. By the mid-19th century, drawings and engravings of the city circulated in Europe, capturing the public's imagination. The rose-red city, half as old as time, had been reborn in the world's consciousness. Serious study of Petra began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Archaeologists mapped the city, catalogued its tombs, and tried to piece together the life of the Nabataeans. What they found revealed a civilization far more sophisticated than legend suggested. The water systems, the trade networks, the fusion of cultures in architecture, all pointed to a people who had not only survived in the desert but thrived, shaping it to their will. Excavations uncovered temples, houses, and inscriptions that shed light on Nabataean language and religion. Coins revealed the faces of their kings, their connections to Rome, their economic power. Step by step, Petra's story was reconstructed, not as a place of mystery alone, but as a living city that had once stood at the heart of ancient commerce. Even so, much remains unknown. The purpose of some monuments, the full scope of Nabataean religion, the details of their decline, all these remain subjects of debate. Petra holds its secrets close, as though reminding us that not everything can be carved from stone or uncovered by excavation. In the 20th century, Petra became not only a site of study, but also of wonder for travellers from across the globe. Roads and infrastructure made it accessible, and soon it was celebrated as one of the great archaeological treasures of the world. In 1985, UNESCO declared Petra a World Heritage Site, calling it one of the most precious cultural properties of man's cultural heritage. In 2007, it was named one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Today, visitors still walk the sick and feel the same awe as Burckhardt did 2 centuries ago. They emerge into the light and the Treasury stands before them, its pink facade glowing as the sun shifts across the sky. They climb to the monastery, stand before the royal tombs, and sit in the amphitheater. And though the city is filled with tourists, guides, and the echo of cameras clicking, the silence of the desert still lingers. At dawn or dusk, when the crowds thin and the light softens, Petra still feels like a place apart, a city where time folds upon itself. What does Petra mean to us now? It is more than a collection of ruins, more than a tourist destination. It is a testament to human resilience, creativity, and adaptation. The Nabataeans remind us that greatness does not always come from conquest or empire. Sometimes it comes from survival, from finding abundance in scarcity, from carving beauty into hardship. Petra's legacy lies not only in stone, but in the lessons it teaches. It tells us that trade can build empires as surely as armies, that water, more than gold, is the true foundation of civilization, that cultures thrive not by closing themselves off, but by absorbing, adapting, and fusing the ideas of others. It shows us the fragility of wealth, the inevitability of change, and the endurance of art. There is a phrase often attached to Petra, a rose-red city, half as old as time. It comes from a 19th century poem by John William Bergen, who won Oxford's Newdigate Prize in 1845 for his verses about Petra. Though Bergen himself never visited the city, his words captured the imagination of the West. And from the rock as if by magic grown, eternal, silent, beautiful, alone, a rose-red city, half as old as time. The phrase endures because it captures Petra's essence. Carved from rose-coloured stone, it seems eternal, timeless, a work of both nature and humanity. It is silent now, but its silence is filled with echoes, the footsteps of caravans, the chants of priests, the laughter of children, the bargaining of merchants. It stands beautiful, alone, yet never forgotten. Petra is not just the story of the Nabataeans. It is the story of human ambition against the odds. It is the story of how trade connects distant worlds, how faith carves meaning into stone, how water sustains life in the harshest places. It is the story of how cities rise, flourish, decline, and are remembered. In standing before the Treasury, one does not simply see a facade, one sees the memory of a people who turned the desert into a kingdom, who lived between worlds and made themselves indispensable. In walking through the sick, one follows the footsteps of merchants from Arabia, Rome, India, and beyond. In climbing to the monastery, one feels the endurance of stone against time. Petra is both a city and a metaphor, a reminder that nothing lasts forever, yet nothing is ever truly lost. The Nabataeans are gone, but their city endures, whispering to us across centuries. Tonight, as we end our journey through Petra, let us imagine the desert under starlight. The canyons are quiet, the cliffs glow faintly under the moon, and the facades of the Treasury and the royal tombs stand like sentinels of memory. The city sleeps as it has for centuries, but it is not dead. It breathes still, in the minds of those who walk its paths, in the words of poets, in the dreams of travellers. Petra's rediscovery was not merely the uncovering of stone, it was the return of a story the world had forgotten, and its legacy, carved in red sandstone, remains with us. A rose-red city, eternal in its silence, half as old as time, and wholly unforgettable. And so, our journey through Petra comes to a close. From the narrow passage of the sick to the sudden majesty of the Treasury, from the hidden channels of water to the towering tombs and temples, We have walked the same paths that once echoed with the steps of caravans. Petra rose from the desert by the hands of the Nabataeans, flourished as the beating heart of ancient trade, and then slipped quietly into silence. It is a city that reminds us of both the fragility and the endurance of human ambition. Though its markets are gone and its people long vanished, the stone still speaks. Tonight, as you drift into rest, let Petra remain with you, a rose-red city, half as old as time, holding its secrets in the desert's embrace. If you've enjoyed this journey and wish to wander through more forgotten places of history, I invite you to subscribe, leave a like, or share this story with others who might listen as they fall asleep. Your support helps keep these timeless echoes alive. Until next time, may the silence of Petra guide you into gentle dreams, and may history keep watch over your night.